I never thought I'd be here telling you this story, but sometimes life throws you into narratives you never expected. My name's Mark, and what I'm about to share with you is the tale of my life unraveling, starting with something as mundane as a doctor's visit. It was a regular Tuesday morning. The sun was just starting to peek through our bedroom curtains, casting a warm glow over everything. Laura, my wife, was already up, her movements quick and practiced in the kitchen. She had that smile, the one that used to light up our entire house. But that day there was something different about it, something off. She announced she was heading to Dr. Simmons for another checkup. Another one? I asked, trying to keep my tone light. But inside, alarm bells were ringing. This was the fourth time this month. Laura's response was too quick, too rehearsed. Just a follow-up, she said, avoiding my eyes. I watched her leave, the sound of her car fading down our street, leaving behind a silence that felt too heavy. Our home, once a sanctuary of love and laughter, now seemed like a stage where I was the only one not in on the act. As I walked through our house, every room told a story of our life together. The living room with its cozy couch where we'd spent countless nights watching movies, the kitchen where we'd shared meals and dreams. But now each space felt like it was hiding something. I started noticing things. Little things, but they added up. Laura's sudden attention to her appearance, the new perfume that lingered in the air, the secretive phone calls she'd excuse herself for. My mind began to race, connecting these dots into a picture I didn't want to see. I told myself I was just being paranoid, that love shouldn't make you question every detail. But when trust starts to falter, every little thing becomes a clue to a puzzle you're desperate to solve. That day, sitting alone in our living room, the realization hit me like a cold wave. Laura was hiding something, and it wasn't just about her health. The unease settled in my stomach, a knot of suspicion that wouldn't untie no matter how much I tried to ignore it. This was just the beginning, the first crack in what I thought was an unbreakable bond. I decided then to watch, to wait, to understand what was really going on, because deep down, I knew something was wrong, and my gut was telling me it was much more than just frequent doctor's visits. The days that followed were like living in a fog of confusion and doubt. I was walking through our life together with a new lens, one that made me question everything. The love I had for Laura was now tangled with suspicion, an emotion I never thought I'd associate with her. I started to watch her more closely, not out of some twisted sense of control, but out of a desperate need to understand. Every time she mentioned another doctor's appointment, my heart would sink a little further. "Why so many visits?" I'd ask, my voice trying to hide the tremor of anxiety. Laura would always have an answer, her explanations almost too smooth, too practiced. "It's just a precaution," she'd say, or "Dr. Simmons is thorough." But her eyes, they didn't meet mine anymore. Not really. I remember one evening, the house was quiet except for the ticking of the clock in the hallway, each tick like a countdown to something I couldn't see. Laura was on the phone, her voice hushed, her laughter different, private, like she was sharing a piece of herself that didn't belong to me anymore. The sound of her joy, once a highlight of my day, now felt like a betrayal. My emotions were a mess. Anger because I felt like I was losing her to something I couldn't fight. Sadness for the love that seemed to be slipping through my fingers like sand. And fear, a deep, gnawing fear that our life together was built on lies. I started to feel like a detective in my own home, piecing together clues from the fragments of our daily life. Then came the day I found the appointment card. Not in the usual place, but tucked away in her purse, under layers of makeup and receipts. It was for a different time and place than she had told me. My heart raced, my hands shook as I held that piece of paper. It was like holding a piece of the puzzle that didn't fit into the picture she had painted. I confronted her, gently at first. "Laura, I found this," I said, holding up the card. Her reaction was quick, her eyes wide with a feigned shock that didn't reach her voice. "Oh, that must be an old one," she dismissed, but the way she snatched it from my hand, avoiding my gaze, told me more than words ever could. That night I lay awake beside her, listening to her steady breathing, wondering about the life she was leading without me. The more I tried to weave our life back together, the more the threads seemed to unravel. There was definitely more going on than I knew, and with each passing day, I felt the weight of it all, the heavy burden of betrayal starting to settle on my shoulders. I knew then I had to dig deeper, not just for answers, but to reclaim some semblance of the truth in our marriage. But with every discovery, I was losing pieces of the woman I thought I knew, and I was scared of what I might find next. The days bled into one another, each one marked by a growing sense of dread. I was caught in a storm of emotions, my mind a battleground where love fought with suspicion. Every interaction with Laura felt like walking on eggshells, each word, each look analyzed for signs of deceit. I couldn't shake the image of that appointment card from my mind. It haunted me, a symbol of everything I didn't know, of the secrets cloaked in the guise of routine. My trust in Laura, once as solid as the foundation of our home, was now riddled with cracks. I decided to follow her. It wasn't a decision I was proud of, but desperation had taken the wheel. I waited until she left for her supposed doctor's visit, my heart pounding in my chest like a drum, signaling the start of a battle. I tailed her car, keeping a safe distance, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. The drive wasn't towards the clinic. Instead, she turned into a quieter part of town, parking outside a quaint cafe. My stomach dropped as I watched her walk in, not in the brisk manner of someone heading to an appointment, but with an ease that suggested familiarity. From my car, I could see through the cafe window. There she was, sitting across from Dr. Simmons. But this wasn't a patient and doctor interaction. Their laughter, the way they leaned closer, the touch of her hand on his arm, it was intimate, personal. My world felt like it was imploding. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. Anger surged through me, hot and blinding, but beneath it was an ocean of hurt. How could this be happening? I loved her with everything I had, and here she was, sharing that light with someone else. The image of them together was a knife twisting in my gut. I drove away before they could see me, my vision blurred by tears of rage and sorrow. At home, I paced our living room, every photo of us now mocking me with their captured moments of joy. I felt like a fool, a stranger in my own life. That evening, Laura came home, all smiles and stories about her day. I wanted to scream, to confront her then and there, but I held back. I needed more, not just for confrontation, but to understand how deep this betrayal ran. The silence between us was deafening, filled with all the words I couldn't say. I watched her trying to reconcile the woman I loved with the one who could betray our vows so easily. Was it all a lie? Or had I missed the signs, too blinded by love to see the truth? My heart was a mess of love, pain, and an emerging resolve. I knew I had to face this head on, but the fear of what I might uncover kept me from acting immediately. I was torn between wanting to salvage what was left of our marriage and the burning need for retribution. That night, as I lay next to her, pretending to sleep, I made a decision. I would find out everything, no matter the cost, because now it wasn't just about love, it was about reclaiming my truth. The tension in our house was palpable, like a storm brewing just beyond the horizon. I was a kettle on the brink of boiling over, my emotions a volatile mix of anger, hurt, and an insatiable need for the truth. I started small, catching her in little lies. "How was the checkup today?" I'd ask, my voice carefully neutral. Laura would respond with practiced ease. "Oh, it was fine, just routine." But her eyes would dart away, a telltale sign of deceit. One evening, I decided to push further. As we sat at dinner, the clink of cutlery on plates filling the silence, I asked, "Did Dr. Simmons say anything new about your health?" There was a slight pause, a moment too long before she answered, "No, just more of the same." I couldn't help it. I pressed on. "That's odd because I thought I saw you at a cafe, not the clinic." Her fork paused midair, her face a mask of surprise. "You followed me?" she asked, her voice a mix of shock and accusation. I didn't deny it. "I had to know, Laura. What's really going on?" My voice was a mix of despair and demand. She tried to laugh it off. "Mark, you're being ridiculous. It was just a meeting about my health." But I saw through her. A meeting in a cafe, laughing like that? My voice broke, the pain seeping through. What kind of health check involves coffee and laughter? Laura's composure slipped. You're making something out of nothing, she insisted, but her eyes told a different story. They were those of someone caught, not just in a lie, but in betrayal. I wanted to explode, to unleash all the fury and hurt, but I held back. I needed more than just this confrontation. I needed the whole truth. If there's nothing to hide, prove it, I challenged, my heart pounding with dread and hope. She couldn't. Instead, she turned defensive, accusing me of mistrust, of invading her privacy. The argument escalated, words like daggers thrown in the heat of the moment, leaving us both wounded. That night, as we lay in bed, not touching, the space between us felt like a chasm. I was torn between my love for her and the undeniable evidence of her deceit. I knew then I couldn't confront her with just this. I needed something incontrovertible, something that would force the truth out into the open. The big reveal was coming, but not tonight. Tonight, I was left with the echoes of our argument, the silence heavy with all the things left unsaid, and a resolve hardening within me. I would find out everything, no matter the cost. The days following our confrontation were like living in a war zone, where every conversation was a potential minefield. The air in our house was thick with unspoken accusations and a palpable tension that seemed to vibrate with each passing moment. I couldn't let it go. The image of Laura with Dr. Simmons was seared into my mind, fueling my resolve to uncover the truth. One morning over breakfast, I tried again. Laura, if there's nothing going on, why not just take me to your next appointment? Let me see for myself. She looked up from her coffee, her eyes narrowing. Why don't you trust me, Mark? It's like you're looking for reasons to doubt me. Her voice was sharp, cutting through the morning calm. Because the reasons are there, Laura. You can't deny what I saw. I countered, my voice rising despite my efforts to keep it steady. You saw what you wanted to see, she shot back, her tone defensive. Or maybe you're just looking for an excuse to end this. That stung. End this? You're the one who's changed, Laura. You're secretive. You lie about where you're going. How am I supposed to react? She slammed her mug down, coffee sloshing over the rim. So what? You're my jailer now. Checking up on where I go? Who I see? No, I'm your husband, trying to understand why my wife looks like she's living a double life. My words were heavy with the weight of my fears. Laura stood, her chair scraping back loudly. Maybe you should look at yourself, Mark. Maybe you're the one pushing me away with your unfounded suspicions. The argument spiraled, each of us throwing words like weapons. Unfounded. I saw you with him, Laura. What else am I supposed to think? I was yelling now, the hurt turning into anger. You don't know what you saw, she yelled back, her face flushed with emotion. You've turned everything into some twisted narrative in your head. The silence that followed was suffocating. I knew then that words alone wouldn't resolve this. I needed proof, undeniable proof. I'm going to find out the truth, Laura. One way or another, I said, my voice a low, determined whisper. She looked at me, her eyes a storm of emotions. Anger, fear, perhaps guilt. You do that, Mark. But remember, sometimes the truth isn't what you want it to be. With that, she stormed out, leaving me alone with the remnants of our breakfast and the fragments of our marriage. That day, I made a call I never thought I'd make. I hired a private investigator. I needed to know, no matter how much it would hurt. The tension between us was now a living thing, growing with each secret unveiled, pushing us further apart with every confrontation. As I sat there, the reality of what I was doing settled in. I was preparing for a battle, not just for the truth, but for the survival of what little remained of us. The days stretched into weeks, each one more tense than the last. The silence between Laura and me was a physical presence in our home, a third entity that watched our every move. I had the PI's reports, each one a nail in the coffin of our marriage. One evening, I decided to confront Dr. Simmons directly. I showed up at his office after his last appointment, my heart pounding with the weight of what I was about to do. Dr. Simmons, I said as soon as he appeared, my voice cold and controlled. We need to talk. About Laura. His face paled slightly, but he tried to maintain his professional demeanor. Mark, this isn't appropriate. Save it, I cut him off, pulling out the photos from my jacket. I know about you and Laura. I want to hear it from you. He looked at the photos, his composure cracking. Mark, it's not what you think. It's exactly what I think, I snapped, my anger barely contained. She's been using her health as an excuse to see you, hasn't she? He sighed, a defeated sound. She said you two were falling apart, that she needed someone to talk to. It got complicated. Complicated? I echoed, my voice dripping with sarcasm. You mean you started sleeping with my wife? Simmons looked away, guilt written all over his face. It wasn't supposed to go this far. I felt like I was choking on my own rage. And how many others, Simmons? How many others has she talked to? He hesitated, then admitted. There are others. She's been seeing multiple people. The confirmation hit like a sledgehammer. My world was collapsing, but a part of me felt a grim satisfaction in knowing the full extent of Laura's betrayal. You've destroyed my marriage, I said, the weight of my words heavy in the quiet office. I'm sorry, Mark. I never meant. I don't care what you meant, I interrupted, my determination hardening. This ends now. Leaving his office, I felt a mix of devastation and resolve. Laura had woven a web of deceit, but now I had the truth. The tension within me was at its peak, a storm ready to unleash. I knew what I had to do next. The big ending was in sight, and I would make sure it was one where Laura would face the consequences of her actions. The plan was forming, and it would be the final act of this tragic play. The air in our house was now a battlefield, charged with silent warfare. Each day I watched Laura, seeing her in a new light, not as my loving wife, but as someone who had masterfully played me for a fool. The PI's latest report confirmed my worst fears. Laura wasn't just seeing Dr. Simmons. There were others, different men, each encounter carefully cloaked in secrecy. My heart was a mix of anger, betrayal, and an icy resolve to end this charade. I decided it was time for a plan, not just for revenge, but for closure, for truth to come out in the open. I started by inviting Laura's parents over for dinner, under the guise of a surprise for her. It'll be nice to have the family together, I said, my voice betraying none of the storm inside. Laura, unsuspecting, was actually excited. What's the occasion? She asked, her eyes lighting up with the thought of a celebration. Just something special, I replied, my smile as fake as the life we were living. In the days leading up to the dinner, I made calls, extended invitations. I contacted each of the men Laura had been seeing, including Simmons, telling them about this surprise celebration. I didn't say what for, only that it was important and Laura would love for them to be there. The night of the dinner arrived. Our house was filled with the aroma of a feast I had no appetite for. Laura was in high spirits, thinking this was all for her, while I prepared for the unveiling of her deceit. As guests arrived, including her parents, I watched her greeting each one with a smile, oblivious to the storm about to hit. Dr. Simmons walked in, looking uncomfortable but curious. Another man followed, then another. Laura's smile faltered, confusion knitting her brows as she recognized them. "What's going on, Mark?" she whispered to me, her voice laced with unease. "You'll see," I said, my tone flat. Once everyone was seated, I stood, my heart racing, but my voice steady. "Thank you all for coming. I thought it was time we all shared something special." I looked at Laura, her face now a portrait of confusion and fear. I began presenting the evidence, photos, text messages, the PI's report. Each piece was like a hammer strike, breaking down the facade. "Laura has been seeing each of you," I announced, my voice echoing in the now silent room. Her parents gasped. The men in the room shifted uncomfortably, and Laura's face drained of color. "Mark, no, this isn't—" "Yes, it is," I cut her off, my voice rising. "You've been living a lie, Laura, using your health, using our marriage as a cover for your affairs." The room erupted. Her parents were in shock, the men embarrassed and some angry. Laura was on the brink of tears, her world collapsing around her. "I filed for divorce," I continued, my voice now cold with finality, "and I've ensured that everything in my name, our home, our assets, remains mine. You'll leave with nothing but the truth of your actions. The plan was set, the big reveal was here, and I was ready for the final chapter. The satisfaction of seeing her face the consequences was bittersweet, but it was the only way to move forward, to reclaim my life from the wreckage of betrayal. The atmosphere in our once warm living room was now icy, heavy with the weight of revelations. Laura stood, her composure shattered, tears streaming down her face as she looked around at the faces of those she had deceived. "Mark, please, you don't understand," she began, her voice breaking. "I understand perfectly, Laura," I said, my tone devoid of the warmth it once held. "I understand that my wife was never the woman I thought she was." Her parents, visibly shaken, spoke up. "Laura, how could you do this?" her mother asked, her voice a mix of disappointment and heartbreak. I I was lost," Laura stammered, looking between us all. "I didn't mean for it to go this far." Dr. Simmons, sitting uncomfortably, added, "I thought I was helping you, Laura, not part of some charade." The other men, each one now realizing they were not unique, but part of a deceitful pattern, looked at her with a mix of betrayal and relief. One spoke up. "You played us all, didn't you?" Laura's face crumpled. "I'm sorry," she whispered, but the words seemed hollow in the face of such betrayal. I felt a strange mix of emotions, a deep, aching sadness for what was lost, anger for the deception, and a cold satisfaction in seeing the truth laid bare. "Sorry isn't enough, Laura. You've ruined more than just our marriage. You've broken trust with everyone here." She looked at me, her eyes pleading. "What now, Mark? What happens to us?" "There is no us," I replied, the finality of it echoing in the room. "You'll leave this house with what you came with. Nothing. I've already moved all the funds, secured our assets. It's all legally airtight." Her father, always the stoic one, spoke up, his voice trembling with emotion. "We raised you better than this, Laura. We'll have to figure out what to do from here." The room was a tableau of shattered lives and relationships. The men began to leave, some with words of anger, others in silent shock. Simmons paused at the door, turning back to Laura. "You need help, Laura. Real help." As the last guest left, it was just Laura and me. The silence between us now a chasm. She looked at me, her eyes red from crying. "I never wanted to hurt you, Mark. I was just so unhappy." "And you chose this way to find happiness?" when I asked, the pain in my voice evident. "You could have talked to me. Instead, you chose to destroy us." She had no answer, just more tears. "I loved you, Laura, but love can't survive lies this deep," I said, feeling the last remnants of our bond slip away. "You need to leave. I'll send your things to wherever you decide to go." She nodded, defeated, and walked toward the door, pausing for a moment. "I'm truly sorry, Mark." I watched her leave, the door closing with a finality that echoed through the empty house. Alone, the weight of my emotions, grief, relief, anger, enveloped me. But there was also a sense of liberation, a closure to the chapter of deception. Sitting in the quiet, I realized the satisfaction was not in revenge, but in the truth coming to light. In that moment, I mourned not just the loss of love, but the innocence of what our life once was. But with the dawn, I knew I'd start rebuilding, not just my life, but my trust in what could be genuine again.